Welcome, Ashley Harpst, to the Dish with Dina
Thank you
podcast.
for having me.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad we're getting a chance to meet and that you can share information about who you are because I don't think we've ever met before,
No,
correct?
no, we
Y-
have not. So I'm a registered dietitian. I specialize in sports nutrition. I work with adult and teenage athletes, soccer players, surfers, and runners. And I also just recently became a certified parent coach. I was trained by Dr. Shafali, so I can help parents help their teenage athletes be confident on and off the field. So the mental part of the game is very important too, as well.
Yeah.
These are skills they can use throughout their life.
Ashley, will you share with us what got you started? Because you and I share a profession of being dietitians, but obviously you have a different specialty than I do.
Mhm.
Where did this all start for you?
Well, I have always been an athlete, and I was interested in how nutrition and athletics were related. So I wanted to learn more. So that always sparked my interest because I noticed that growing up, a lot of the other soccer players were skipping meals, and it really affected their playing time. And also the other, like the surfers, weren't eating. So like, no, I can't eat before I surf, and they were becoming severely dehydrated. They weren't able to pop up, and the soccer players were constantly hitting the wall because they weren't eating and drinking enough. So to help my teammates, also to help myself.
How long have you been a dietitian?
17 years.
17 years. Okay, because you are part of the generation where it wasn't necessarily forced upon you to have to go in to get a master's degree, but there are specialty certifications for people who want to go into something like sports nutrition. So I
Mhm.
know that we have a lot of dietetic interns and nutrition students, and sometimes even newly credentialed dietitians that listen to these episodes. Will you share a little bit about that journey for you? Like, where did you do your internship and how did you really know that there was a specialty to be had?
Okay, sure. I did my internship at Emory University Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was fortunate that I secured an elective rotation with a sports dietitian. So, and she was very instrumental in guiding me of how I could do this. And she said, you're really going to have to work hard and just kind of put your name out there because this is a very niched specialty and there is a lot of competition. For example, chiropractors, even massage therapists are doing sports nutrition counseling. So you have to find a way to just really network and make yourself stand out.
That's one of the things that comes up a lot in our conversations with this profession is because it's food, everybody has an opinion or people
Mhm.
give guidance that are not necessarily credentialed. So
Yes.
that leads me to, can you share a little bit about some of the maybe the controversial or things that kind of are hot topics in your niche? What are some of the things that you do feel like you're constantly having to clarify or navigate around with misinformation or disinformation?
First is carbohydrates. A lot of athletes think they don't have to eat them. Mostly it's a lot of it's my female athletes because they're so worried about gaining weight. They go, no, the carbs will make me gain weight, and I have to keep educating them, saying no, they don't do that. You need them for energy, and for every gram of carbohydrate you consume, it's 3 ounces of water. It's not actual weight, and your performance is really going to suffer. And so for some of them, I just kind of say, okay, well, you can try this, and they fail. So for sometimes you just have to let the person fail to realize that what they're doing is not working.
Do you think that those beliefs come from past experiences with people in the athletic performance world, or is it a combination of familial conversations that are taking place, like watching their own parents go through their own relationships with food? What seems to be the place where we can start helping people break those beliefs or those thoughts?
Yeah, it starts a lot with the familiar relationships. Even some of the coaches are telling their athletes not to eat carbs. So it starts with the parents, the coaches, but also the media. There's a lot of, as you know, a lot of misinformation in the media. Like remember to cut the carbs, not the taste. Um, that was just what was popular at that time. So all the athletes think, oh, I can cut the carbs. So a lot of that too.
Right. That's one of the things. And listen, as an Italian person, I used to say like I'm contractually obligated to have a bowl of spaghetti at every meal if I felt like it. But that's really something that even in the non-sports related arenas, that's a very, very common misconception or concern
Right.
that so many people have. And I feel like when we start vilifying things, when we bring fear into things and we start attaching these emotions to things as well, like if I eat this, then
Mhm.
I'm bad or guilty for whatever, then we're venturing down this whole disordered eating path as well.
Right.
So that's really tricky to navigate. And I know, especially in sports, dietetics, but also in the world of sports, as you mentioned earlier too, what are some things that you do see where you might have to separate out because we are dietitians, we're not trained, the mental health behavior
Mhm.
specialists. So what helps you understand maybe some common symptoms? And of course, I'll put a trigger warning in this discussion as well for anybody who finds this to be sensitive to
Right.
discuss. But where do you start noticing like this might be a little bit bigger than me and we might need to bring in some extra help here, other providers in?
Right. Well, weight loss is a big one. Emotion may be irritability because if you're cutting the carbs, that can cause irritation, irritability, less able to concentrate. Um, if they're always like worried about how their other teammates look versus how they look, not just like how they look in the uniform. And also like the teenage athletes, how their friends and the other athletes look at school, or they're able to wear these clothes. I can't. There might be some body image issues going on. You need to call in a therapist for that.
And so let's talk a little bit too. It's not just
Sure.
the sports discussion, but
Right.
also the population. So you work with a very particular age range and a variety of different performance athletics as there as well. Can you share what is a typical week in the life of you? Like who are you working with? Who are the things that, especially I think at the time of this recording, we're just starting a new school year.
Mhm.
So share a little bit about a typical week in the life of you.
Well, I typically see about 4 clients a day. Right now, I'm working with a teenage runner, a girl, and doesn't have any concerns about her body issues, but she was taught by her coach cut the carbs and eat more protein. So yeah, and I see my clients online on Zoom, but with her, just I mean, she was actually very receptive to information from me because she did notice that her performance was really decreasing. And I told her, this is the carbs. The protein doesn't provide the energy you need. So you need to eat more carbs. And she was fine. But yeah.
Are you also working with the actual athletic directors or the coaches too, or are you working more on like a one-on-one type of basis?
One-on-one type basis with the athletes, but I have done sports nutrition presentations where the coaches have come, and I plan on doing more.
We tend to talk about, getting out there and networking, collaborating, partnership, but also kind of like these in-service trainings that we can provide to
Mm,
people who are part of our interdisciplinary team. And in your case, that would include people like coaches as well, to dispel the myths or dispel their maybe concerns around stating things without having the background knowledge, or maybe the information that they had is kind of outdated and we know better now too. So
mhm.
are you taking it upon yourself to market yourself in that way? Let's talk a little bit about like business outreach as well. Like how do you get your name out there? Who's receptive? What kind of functions are you attending?
Right. Well, I've worked with a lot of club soccer teams. I've done sports nutrition presentations for them, and the coaches have come. And that was just kind of talking to the coaches on Instagram, also just emailing them directly. And also, Instagram is a big thing that I use a lot, like with connecting with the coaches, and also strength and conditioning coaches. That's another really good way to connect with athletes is through, and also physical therapists as well.
Okay, walk me through social media because it is a necessary evil. It is making me crazy these days. Do you feel like the more you put into it, the more return on investment you get, or are you using it as an extension of what you're already doing?
More of an extension. Mostly I use social media to grow my email list. It's rare that I get a direct client from social media.
I'm
Yeah.
finding that too. I recently, this morning, I also had another dietitian that I was interviewing as a guest for this podcast, and we were talking about that too. It's like, we are so enamored by so many of our colleagues who really seem to be killing it. But I also realize that just because somebody has a very large following or they are online all the time and putting a lot of content out there doesn't necessarily convert into paying clients.
Right, right.
And so I say this all because, anyone who's watching or listening to these episodes, you might be the recipient of the content that we're sharing, or you might also be a person who enjoys putting things on social media. So it really has to come from a place of either you love what you're doing or there is a real consistency to the business planning of being online and marketing yourself in that way. I don't
Mhm.
know if I have the mental capacity anymore, honestly, Ashley. I used to be so in love with it, but my days are just filled with other things, and then I just think like I'm half-assing my stuff when I finally get out there. So I enjoy it. I like promoting things. Sometimes I'll get some feedback on it. Maybe I need to fine tune a little bit more around it. Where do you see, just as far as your future experiences taking you? Are you planning on developing any more as far as services or products or, even food, nutrition, supplements, things like, are you planning on getting into that arena as well? What is the future you going to entail?
Well, I'd like to also continue to work with clients, do presentations, but also work with brands and have some brand partnerships because that's another good way to educate athletes and also just the general public as well. So do some more media work and eventually create an online course for for teenage athletes as well.
When it comes to you juggling all the things that are currently on in your responsibilities and also knowing, hopefully we lead and live by example, being that we're wellness providers, is there something that you have in your own repertoire where we call them like non-negotiables? Like, how do you maintain being productive and doing things for your business professional life, but then also making sure that you are maintaining quality self-care as well?
Well, what helps with me is chunking. Like maybe I'll do a couple of videos, but I won't edit them right away. So just chunking time, setting aside time for this, but not making that my whole day. And then like setting this. That's what really helps me. And also automation. That's probably like the biggest thing. Like because the Facebook Meta Business Center, that's free to download, and you can automate. You can schedule posts, and you can just leave it alone. So just like I mentioned, just chunking blocks of time, like during the week, to do certain things helps me because yeah, I don't want to be on social media all the time. I mean, I do it, but I don't want to be on it all the time.
And then in your personal life, are you purposely taking out time? Do you meal plan? Do you exercise yourself as often as you want to? Like, are there certain non-negotiable
Yeah,
areas of your week?
yes, I always make time for exercise, like about 6 days a week, and one day I just maybe do something light. But yeah, it's something that really helps me relax, and because I've always loved to be active, it's a great way for me to just relax, decompress, and give me more energy to do other things. So yeah, I always
Yeah.
make time for that.
Are you venturing into, and forgive me because I don't remember seeing this on your website, but when you're working with your clients, are you also taking insurance or is this a self-pay practice?
No, this is self-pay. There's no insurance, and at least in California, where I am, that sports nutrition is not covered.
Is not covered. Yeah,
Uh,
we've had discussions in the past with a lot of different criteria that has to be met and how challenging it can be, both on our end as the provider and also on the patient or client's end too,
right.
with trying to be like, how do I budget this out? So share with us also how your services are created, because I believe you also have programs too, which some people do and some people work more like on a session by session. Is that how you are currently, so that you yeah, especially since if they're working towards competition or they're going to practices, that you're kind of with them along the way?
Right. I offer packages. I don't do session by session because with my athletes, they're working towards something. And it's not something that can really be resolved here and there. It's something that's they need consistently to be with me. It's a 3 month package. But and sometimes they need more than 3 months. Most of the time they don't.
If you had to think of maybe a few things that seem to come up as questions or concerns that seem to be hot topics within your discussions with people, aside from the carbohydrates things, are there other things that you feel like you're always having to kind of address in your sessions?
Usually with the teenage athletes is poor appetite, like not wanting to eat before they compete. That's a big thing. And like, no, no, I'm nervous. No, no, I'll be fine. I don't need to eat anything. Just leave me alone. No, no, I'm going to get stomach cramps in the field. That's something that comes up a lot. Is even with the adult athletes, that does too.
Uh,
Is no appetite.
Yeah, and I would say too, I know in my world, I don't work with athletes at all, but in my world, a lot of the issues around appetite are because either people have really had some not great relationships with food, have caused themselves to have chronic dieting, or as they're getting older, they're not necessarily aware. How do you teach somebody to acknowledge or embrace that appetite, like the cues that they're looking out for? Is it a process? Do you have them rate or evaluate or, give you some feedback as far as their symptoms or signs that they're going through day by day?
It's really like kind of like it depends on the person. Mostly with the a lot of the athletes say, "Well, I get headaches," and I said, "Well, that's could be a sign of you're hungry." Or and sometimes they all like the adult athletes as they get older, they don't really they confuse hunger with thirst, and they're actually thirsty because actually after the age of 30, you start to lose the detection for thirst. So headaches mostly, but with them, I try to say, okay, let's try to train your stomach. So let's start with liquid nutrition first, and let's slowly work our way up to some solid food. That seems to be work with most of the athletes. So that way they don't think, oh, you're going to push something, or no, 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 we're just going to take baby steps to try to train your stomach to get used to having something inside your stomach while you're exercising.
Yeah, that almost like reverse aversion therapy. Like you're purposely adding something in for them
Right.
to be aware of. Okay, so aside from your current clientele, can you talk a little bit about just the general benefits of being physically active? Because as you just mentioned too, after the age of 30-ish, 35, like we just naturally start deteriorating with a lot of things. And I think again, on my end, what I tend to see is people will always try to control their diet, but not necessarily embrace physical activity or say that they don't necessarily have the time to do something as far as daily movement. And I know for myself how important even things like stretching in the morning, especially after injuries, or
Right.
making sure that I'm going to the gym or getting outdoors. So walk us through a little bit of like maybe some of your helpful hints, some guidance just to kind of get us out there and be able to move a little bit more than we probably are.
Okay, well, the best kind of workout is something that you love to do. And that doesn't necessarily have to be going to the gym. That could be just going for a walk. Getting outside, that's a huge thing because that really, research has shown being outdoors really boosts your mood rather than just like going to the gym all the time. If you can go for a walk with a friend, you can do a light jog, whatever it is that you really love to do is probably the best kind of workout you can do. And just maybe just finding little ways to move your body throughout the day. Like if you can, this is an obvious thing, but taking the stairs instead of the elevator. If you can, park your car far away from your job if you have to walk into the office, and even walking around while you're talking on the phone is a big thing. So there's just like very little baby little small little steps that you can take to incorporate more movement. I'm walking the dog, that's huge.
Right. That's really the thing. It's like the more sedentary is the issue. It's getting up and just being physically active. So it's true, right? We've seen research that it doesn't have to be the recommendation is 30 minutes a day-ish or so of like
Right.
moderately intense activity, but it doesn't have to be in a row. So like
No.
every little bit
Yeah, yeah.
helps. Just like Ashley said, get out, move around, try not to be stagnant. Will you talk to about, again, what I was saying before about diet sometimes feels like a priority with a lot of people, and secondary is the physical activity. In physical activity space, I see a lot of people gearing more towards cardiorespiratory activity and staying away from strength training. And I know that it is important, especially after the age of 35, and especially to assist as for females too, as we're getting older and a little bit more, prone for things like all the osteo things, osteoporosis,
Right.
arthritis. Can you share with us a little bit about that too? What are your thoughts about cardio versus strength training? Where should that all fit in our routine?
Well, they're both equal. They're both very important, but especially for females, like you mentioned, the bones getting, like weaker. Strength training really helps strengthen your bones. And again, if you can do, it might be better if you did a little more, but if you can do at least 15 minutes a day of strength training, and again, this doesn't have to be like some women think I have to lift on, these really heavy weights and I'm gonna start bulking up and looking like a man. No, that's not gonna happen. A lot of my teenage girls are afraid, but I don't want to look like a guy. I'm like, you're not gonna look like a guy. Like even that could just be like buying like the stretch resistance bands and pulling those. Like I could tell some of my adult clients, like you could sit at your desk and like take like a 10-minute break and just pull the bands. That's something you can do. Even like during COVID, a lot of my clients were filling up milk, like, the gallons of milk and putting water in it and freezing it and using those as dumbbells because a lot of them didn't have the gym. And what was funny is like at Target, a lot of the dumbbells were gone because everybody was buying them. So it's like, well, you can make your own dumbbell. You can you can try that. You can do dextercise like push-ups at your desk. So yeah, strength training is equally as important as cardio, because yeah, a lot of people think there's cardio. No, you need to do strength training too, because when you have stronger muscles, that helps you not just on the in sports, but also just your general health. You're going to feel much better.
I wanted to ask you something back to the more specific population that you're working with. A couple of things. First of all, do you notice more injuries or issues happening as far as the body is concerned? Because these people are moving in a different way than the rest of the average human would be. If so, what are some of those things, and is there a way for them to avoid that?
I don't see it as much with the adult athletes, more with the teenage athletes. So a lot of ACL injuries with my soccer players, because a lot of them start playing club soccer when they're 8 years old, and which is young. I mean, and it's just the more they do it, the more prone they are to an injury. So I mean, there's not like a real way to prevent that. The ways, two things you can do is making sure you have enough vitamin D in your diet, which really does help you strengthen your muscles and helps prevent injuries. But obviously, that's not going to stop you from tearing your ACL, but it might make your ligaments and your muscles a little stronger, so it might not happen. So that's one thing is, and also making sure you're getting enough calcium. And you don't have to just have dairy. There are other high calcium foods like spinach and calcium fortified orange juice. But yeah, calcium, vitamin D, those are huge.
To maintain that integrity. And also, I think it's fair to assume that if an injury does happen, you're more likely to bounce back a lot quicker because
Right,
your
your
body
recovery be faster.
is resilient. I also have a question about protein powders and or protein bars and or mixes and things. Do you have any weigh-ins on that? Because I know as dietitians, we could be like, you can make your own, but there are conveniences that happen. And when it comes to this discussion around quote unquote processed foods, everybody's got an opinion about certain things, but there's definitely ways that we can incorporate, I think, different things for different people. So what's your take on some of these more convenient type of things instead of people creating protein drinks from scratch or having a shake if they don't feel like doing that?
Well, I mean, I understand it's best to have the food in the natural state, but that's just not real life. That's not always going to happen. And I understand that. And I tell my athletes, like, if you don't have access to a refrigerator, it's okay to have and you can't have a meal. It's okay to have a ready to drink protein drink. It's okay. Like Orgain protein drinks are good. Those with the fruit and the yogurt, those are actually really good. And I say, okay, that's okay once in a while. Try not to do this daily, but it's okay once in a while is my take, but not something that I would recommend all the time. Because yes, people would like you to eat in natural state, but that's just not real life. It's just not always going to happen when you're busy, and I understand that.
I wanted to also ask because in that same realm, things like sports drinks, so replenishing the electrolytes, and also the goopy gel that people will sometimes pack with them as they're running.
Right.
Any insight into that too? Do you have any better favorite options or alternatives that you might want to include in this discussion?
Yeah, organic Gatorade is good. That has that's made with cane sugar. And also my athletes, they can even make their own sports drink. It's with 3/4 a cup of coconut water, 3/4 a cup of watermelon juice, and 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. If they don't want to drink that, that works well as well. Other things like Go-Go Squeeze applesauce. You just squeeze it and you squeeze it in your mouth. You could do that while you're running. That's another good option as versus the goos. But I mean, again, I understand that you may not always have access. So, I mean, I would never say you can never have that. It's just if try other things. But if that's your only option, it's okay once in a while. And also, even the Gatorade energy chews, that's fine too.
And I
Once
really
in a while.
appreciate this discussion too. I often find people will go towards these supplements or products, even if they're not an athlete, Ashley. So there are reasons that these things should be purchased and implemented.
Right.
Can you give some guidance on that too? Like, people who might want to drink sports drinks, even though they're not necessarily doing sports. What are some of the potential risks or complications that can happen if that's the case?
Well, with the sports drink like Gatorade, you really only have to drink Gatorade if you're exercising intensely for more than an hour, or if you're outdoors and it's really hot. Even if you're not exercising intensely, but it's really hot, then yes, absolutely, yes, you would need Gatorade. But with those sports drinks, they're very high in sugar. So if you're not doing any of those things, probably the biggest consequence would be weight gain. If that's not something you want, that's a big, because you can, the extra calories and sugar will all add up.
As we're coming up on some of the ends of our discussions here, I wanted to find out from you if there was anything that I didn't necessarily know to ask, or words of wisdom you might want to give, whether it's somebody just getting started in training or being interested in going and playing for a sports team of some sort, or even just general dietetics discussions to the general population.
If you're interested in playing any sport, go for it. It doesn't matter what age you are. If it sounds like fun, go ahead and try it. Don't be, turned off if you've never done it, because there's probably always people there that haven't. And for the most part, I've noticed that, people, myself, like I've always, even in like the adult co-ed leagues, there's always someone that has never played soccer before. And everyone's always really willing to help. So, get out there, try it, and just have fun. General dietetics discussions, please, like all dietitians are here to help you. So please don't go thinking that we're going to put you on a diet, especially, sports dietitians and even the weight loss dietitians. We don't do that. No, we work with your schedule and your lifestyle, and you're able to still eat the foods you enjoy, but with our recommendations, then reach your goals. So that's what a lot of people think. You're gonna put me on a diet. No, we're not gonna do that. So, or tell me I can only eat chicken every day. No, we're not gonna do that either. So that's something that I do have some clients thinking before they work with me that's gonna happen. I'm like, no, that's not. So
Right, it's just grilled chicken, steamed broccoli, and that's
right.
and brown rice or whatever. I really appreciate this. I also want to touch a little bit too about the resilience of the human body. If somebody has never, like you said, if they've never played a particular sport and they're a little bit concerned about it, but as we age, it's helpful to make sure that we maintain the integrity of our human body. And I always use my mom as an example. She doesn't like when I give her age, but she's in her 80s at this point. But I'll sleep over there. I'll spend a week with her. She lives in New Jersey. I live in New York City, and I'll spend a week with her there. And I have a schedule and she has a schedule. So I'll get up and move around and do yoga in the morning or go for a
Mhm.
run. And I'll come back and she's in the living room lifting weights
Oh,
or
cool.
doing wall push-ups. And it really, I love watching that happen because she's had a few falls and fractures in her life as well, most recently too, and the way that she bounces back. So I think this is a true testament, and Ashley, you can speak on this also, that even if you've never started to start something, obviously with medical clearance, I'm going to disclaim that,
Of course,
but
yes,
but
absolutely.
as you're continuing that, as I was saying before too, I really think it does help with the resilience of the body. So if you end up being sick or having an injury or whatever, it feels like you're recovering that much more. So how do you get people who are young to think about the future them? How do we get a, 15 or 16-year-old to think about who they're going to be when they're 80?
Well, probably for me, because I also work in a hospital too, and I talk to them. I mean, I talk to them about some of the clients in the hospital. I say, I have a client that's only in her 50s and she has a walker. There's a strong possibility and she never exercised. There's a strong possibility if she did, she wouldn't be that way. So probably just using real life examples, and also just say, is this what you want when you're 15?
And I was going to say 50 to a 15-year-old feels like you might as well be 110. Ashley, when I finish my conversations with my guests, I always ask a two-part question, which
Sure.
is the following. What is on your plate today? So obviously we're on two separate coasts right now at the time of this recording. It's my evening and it's kind of like your early evening-ish,
It's
I
5:30.
think. So when we're done with this conversation, or even tomorrow, what's the next thing that you're going to be working on? So the more figurative on your plate. And then what's the next meal that you're having?
Well, I already ate. I'll start with that. I just had like some salmon and some rice and some like mixed vegetables for dinner. But next thing I'm gonna be working on, I'm doing another presentation. This is in California. It's about the 5 tips to crush game day anxiety, because a lot of my teenage athletes, even some of my adults, like have a lot of anxiety on competition day and they're not able to eat. So just some mindful techniques that they can use to kind of calm themselves down, as well as what to eat to, if they can't eat a full meal, and tips to help prevent nausea. So that's in San Diego on September 24th at the La Jolla Rifford Library community room, and it's at 6:30. It's free. So that's something I'm working on.
That is fantastic. I didn't even think of that too. Like, I mean, I work as an adjunct lecturer, so I work with a lot of students, and we talk, even just the, the dietetics, the RD exam
Right.
also. I We talk about that too, like not just taking the test and preparing and knowing the information, but also getting yourself to a place of confidence and comfort so that the anxiety doesn't take over. And a lot of people will forego eating, but eating provides you with energy and brain
Right.
power. So
It helps you concentrate.
I,
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that too. So game day anxiety, that is such a wonderful addition
Yeah.
to your repertoire to be able to include conversations around that. Is it fair to assume, is it some, concentration breathing exercises that you might be
It's
discussing?
that too. It's that too, but also like how, like as I mentioned earlier, I'm a certified parent coach. So also how the parents are showing up in their awareness for their athletes. Because if the parents are like, sometimes what happens is that they see that their teenager or is getting nervous, they get nervous, and which that just builds, 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 builds. It's like how they can show up differently for their teenager, things that they can do as well.
Yeah,
So
it
that's
really it takes a village, and there's a support
right,
system there, and also it gives the athlete, the teenage athlete, know that they are not alone. They're there to have that support, and there's, people thinking and thinking positive, sending positive vibes their way.
right, right,
Ashley, I really appreciate you being on here because we don't really get a lot of super specialty people. And when it comes to sports discussions, I know nothing about, I'm not a very naturally athletic type of person. So I always find it so fascinating that people like you do what you do. I'm so grateful that there are opportunities in the dietetics profession to not just have to work in a clinical setting or in a community setting. You have opportunities like this. So if anybody's
right,
listening or watching, you know, consider things like this, like what brings you joy. You can also
right,
be, you can, right, you can get yoga training or become a personal trainer and also stick
right.
that in your pocket too. I really appreciate this. Any final parting words before we wrap up?
Like you mentioned earlier, just have fun. Any sports you're doing, any like just know that any wellness activities you're doing is not only going to benefit your physical health but your mental health as well. So just always keep that in mind. You know that it's gonna mentally make you feel better and physically, but focus more on how it mentally makes you feel rather than your physical appearance. Because I mean, if that's what you're working towards, that will come. But just focus, right now on how it's making you feel. So if you're
Yeah.
having fun, feeling good, you're doing it right.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. There's always got to be the start of the behaviors and the interior. There's not a lot of guarantee with other things, but I think that's a wonderful takeaway. Thank you so
All
much,
right.
Ashley. It was a
All right.
pleasure
Thank you.
getting to know you and
Yes,
spending
you
time with
too.
you. Thanks so much.
Yes, you too. Thank you.